You feel the cold water first, the way it moves around your ankles like something alive, patient, and you think about how strange it is that water can be both soft and sharp at the same time, how it numbs your feet while the sun presses heat into your shoulders, into the back of your neck where your hair is tied. You're a priestess of Hera, which means your days are measured in ritual, in the careful arrangement of offerings, in the smell of burned laurel and honey. And right now, in this moment before everything changes, you're just standing in a river because the afternoon is hot and the temple is empty and no one will miss you for an hour. The grass on the bank is the kind of green that only exists in late spring, almost too bright, and when you stepped on it barefoot a few minutes ago, it was still damp from the morning, cool and yielding, and you remember thinking that it felt like the earth was breathing. There are birds somewhere above you, small ones, making that rapid clicking sound that means they're nervous or happy. You've never been sure which, and the air smells like wet stone and wild herbs, that sharp, clean scent that makes you want to breathe deeper. You're not thinking about gods right now, not really. You're thinking about how the light looks when it hits the water at this angle, all fractured and golden, and how your feet have gone numb in a way that feels almost pleasant. And how, if you close your eyes, the sound of the river is loud enough to erase everything else. This is safety, you think, without knowing you're thinking it. This is what it feels like when the world is exactly the size of your body and nothing more. She notices the silence first, the way it arrives too quickly, like a door closing in a room she didn't know she was in. And when she looks up, the birds are gone, not flying away, but simply absent, as if they were never there at all. The river is still moving, but the sound has changed, flattened somehow, and the light that was golden a moment ago now feels white and clinical. The kind of brightness that makes everything look overexposed, unreal. She steps out of the water because her instincts are good, because she's spent her whole life learning to read the small wrong details that mean something larger is shifting, and her feet on the grass feel different now, less like walking and more like being placed. Like something is watching each step and noting it. There's a wind that shouldn't exist, not from any direction she can name, and it moves through the trees in a way that makes no sound, just motion. Just the branches bending slightly as if making room for something passing through. She wraps her arms around herself even though she's not cold, even though the sun hasn't moved, and she realizes with the kind of clarity that arrives only in moments of real danger that she has become the center of attention for something she cannot see. The world hasn't changed, not visibly, but the quality of space around her has shifted, has become anticipatory. The way air feels right before a lightning strike, dense and waiting. She starts walking back toward the temple, not running because running would confirm the fear, would make it real, and with each step she feels the weight of being observed, not by eyes but by something more total, more patient, a presence that has already decided and is simply waiting for her to understand. The shadows under the trees are darker than they should be, pooled and thick, and when she passes them she feels certain, absolutely certain, that if she looked directly at one it would move. She goes back to the temple because that's what you do when you're afraid. You return to the place that's supposed to protect you, and at first everything seems normal. The other priestesses moving through their tasks with the same steady rhythm they always have. But when she tries to speak to Cleo, the girl she's known since they were both children, Cleo's eyes slide past her face like water off stone, like she's looking at something behind her, something she doesn't want to acknowledge. She tries again with Thalia, who is older and has always been kind, who once held her while she cried over something she can't even remember now, and Thalia turns away before she can finish her sentence, turns with a deliberateness that makes it clear this isn't accidental, this is choice. The silence in the temple is different from the silence by the river, it's human and intentional, a silence made of avoidance, and she begins to understand that whatever has marked her is visible to them in a way it isn't to her, that they can see she's already been chosen and they're protecting themselves the only way they know how. No one will meet her eyes, no one will stand close to her during the evening prayers, and when she reaches out to touch the shoulder of a girl who used to laugh at her jokes, the girl flinches, actually flinches, as if her hand carries contagion. This is the loneliness that institutions create, the kind that happens when the structure you trusted decides your acceptable loss. when the system that promised shelter reveals it was only ever shelter for those who remain unmarked. She spends the night in her small room and no one comes to check on her. And in the morning, when she walks to the shrine, there's a space around her that no one crosses, a circle of emptiness that follows her like a shadow, and she knows now with absolute certainty that she is alone in this, that whatever happens next will happen to her and only her, and the people she thought were her community will watch from a safe distance and do nothing. She's by the river again because there's nowhere else to go, because the temple has made it clear through silence that she's no longer protected there, and she's standing in the same spot where the water is shallow and the grass is green. Trying to find that feeling of safety she had before, trying to convince herself that fear is just fear and not prophecy. The air changes first, grows thick and white, and she watches as a fog that has no natural source begins to rise from the ground, not rolling in from anywhere, but simply appearing, materializing in layers that build upward until she can't see the trees anymore, can't see the sky, can't see anything except the dense, colorless space directly around her body. The world goes silent in a way that feels like pressure, like being underwater, and she opens her mouth to scream, but the sound stops in her throat, not blocked, but somehow prevented, as if the air itself has decided what sounds are allowed. She feels him before she sees him, a presence that makes the fog seem thin by comparison, and when he appears it's not dramatic, not theatrical. He's simply there the way a fact is there, inevitable and inarguable, and she understands in that moment that this was always going to happen, that every choice she made led here not because of fate, but because his will bends the world into shapes that serve him. What happens next has no language, or if it does, she'll spend the rest of her existence trying to forget it. But the world itself reacts. The river stops moving mid-current, just stops, the water hanging in place like glass, and every bird for miles goes silent at exactly the same moment. And the fog presses in tighter as if it's being used, as if it has purpose. When it's over, when he's gone, the world restarts with a small sound like a breath, and she's on the ground, and the grass is pressed flat around her in a perfect circle, and she knows that her life as she understood it has ended. And she wasn't the only one. This is the part that matters. This is the thing that turns individual horror into system, because what happened to her was policy, was pattern, was the way power has always operated when it knows it won't be stopped. She was a huntress, Callisto, one of Artemis's chosen, which meant she'd sworn an oath of virginity that was supposed to mean something, was supposed to protect her, and for a while it did, or she thought it did, until the day he decided the oath was irrelevant. He came to her wearing Artemis's face, which is a particular kind of cruelty, using the form of the one person she trusted absolutely, and by the time she understood the deception, it was too late. The thing was done. And when Artemis found out, when the goddess she'd served with absolute devotion discovered she was pregnant, there was no mercy, no investigation into consent or coercion, just rage, just punishment. The transformation happened slowly enough that she felt every part of it, her fingers curling inward and darkening, the nails thickening into claws, and she tried to scream, but her voice was already changing, deepening into something between a moan and a growl. And the worst part, the part that made it worse than death, was that her mind stayed intact, stayed human, trapped inside a body that was becoming animal. She felt her face push forward into a snout, felt her teeth sharpen and multiply, felt thick, dark fur punch through her skin in thousands of small agonies, and the sound, she never forgot the sound of her own bones breaking and reforming, that wet crack and pop that meant her spine was reshaping, meant her skull was widening, and through all of it she remained conscious, remained herself, a human mind watching its own erasure from inside a bear's body. They hunted her later, Artemis and her hunters, the women who used to be her sisters, and she ran because that's what bears do. But she knew them, recognized their voices calling to each other through the forest, and when the arrow finally came, it was almost relief. Except it wasn't, because in those last moments before the darkness, she was still human enough to understand she was being killed by people who'd once loved her, who had no idea who she really was. Semele made a different mistake. She asked to see him as he truly was, which sounds like hubris until you understand she'd been lied to so many times, had been visited in darkness and shadow and half forms, and she just wanted once, just one time, to know what was real. He warned her, which is what makes it worse, told her it would kill her, and she insisted anyway because by that point she was pregnant with his child, and she thought that meant something. Thought that gave her the right to truth. When he revealed himself, it wasn't gradual, wasn't merciful. He simply appeared in his full divine form, and she burned, not from fire, but from the sheer concentrated reality of what he was, the kind of energy that mortal bodies aren't built to withstand. And there was no ash, no remains. She just ceased to exist. Matter converted to light and then to nothing. The room she'd been standing in was empty afterward, completely empty. Not even a scorch mark on the floor. And the only reason anyone knew what happened was because he told the story later, described it with something that might have been regret, but functioned as warning. And the child, Dionysus, he cut from her dissolving body and sewed into his own thigh to finish the pregnancy, which means she didn't even get the dignity of being remembered as a mother, just as the woman who asked for too much and got exactly what she asked for. She feels it beginning in her hands, Io does. A numbness that spreads up her arms like cold water, and when she looks down, her fingers are darkening. The skin thickening into something that isn't skin anymore. Something rough and covered in short white hair that's spreading, growing denser with each second. She tries to speak, tries to call for help, even though she knows no one will come, and her voice emerges as something between a word and a low, the sound cattle make. And the horror of that, of hearing her own voice betray her, is worse than the physical pain. Her face is changing. She can feel it pushing forward, her nose and mouth extending into a muzzle, her teeth shifting and flattening, and her eyes are moving to the sides of her head, and the world suddenly has no depth, is flat and wide and wrong. She falls forward because her spine is bending, restructuring itself for a body that walks on 4 legs instead of 2, and her hands and feet are hardening, are becoming hooves. And the worst part, the part that makes this punishment worse than death, is that her mind remains completely human, completely intact. A priestess's consciousness trapped inside a cow's body with no way to communicate, no way to tell anyone who she is. She tries to write her name in the dirt with her hoof and manages a few scratches that could be anything, could be nothing, and her father sees her later, sees this white heifer, and doesn't recognize his own daughter, and she can't tell him, can only make sounds that mean nothing to human ears. Hera isn't finished though. Hera who punishes the victim instead of the perpetrator because that's how these systems work, that's who's allowed to bear the consequences, and she sends a gadfly, a single insect that will follow Io across the entire world, stinging her constantly, never letting her rest, never letting her stop moving. The torment isn't dramatic, it's monotonous. It's the same pain repeated endlessly across years, across continents, a human mind experiencing animal suffering with no hope of explanation, no hope of end, just the constant burning sting and the knowledge that this is her existence now. This is what her life has become, running forever from a pain that will never stop, in a body that can't even scream properly. We look at maps now and see the Bosphorus, which means Ford of the Cow, the strait named for the place where she crossed in her desperate flight, and we don't think about why. Don't let ourselves imagine the human mind inside the animal body, driven mad by pain and isolation, running because staying still meant dying under the endless stinging. We've turned her suffering into geography, into a word we say without thinking, the way we've turned all of them into names and constellations and stories we tell without weight, without letting the reality of what happened settle into our bones. Callisto is a star cluster now, beautiful and distant, and we point telescopes at her and never think about the woman who died confused and terrified, killed by the people she loved while wearing a shape she never chose. Semele is a footnote in Dionysus's story, barely mentioned, the mother who wasn't careful enough, who wanted too much. And we don't talk about how asking to see truth shouldn't carry a death sentence, shouldn't result in annihilation so complete there's not even a body to bury. We've sanitized these stories, sanded down their edges until they sound like mythology instead of testimony, until they feel distant and symbolic instead of real and specific. And in doing that, we've done exactly what the system required. We've turned victims into aesthetics, suffering into narrative, horror into heritage. The power that destroyed them is still here, just wearing different names, still operating under the same principle that some bodies are expendable. that some voices don't need to be heard, that punishment falls on the convenient rather than the guilty. And we participate in this every time we repeat these stories without weight, every time we teach them as literature instead of evidence, every time we let ourselves forget that these were people, were real, were destroyed by a system that knew exactly what it was doing and did it anyway. A memory becomes a myth when there's no one left to scream.